fuck? Read the disclaimer. Hello everyone and welcome to Beyhistory, where we take a look at the history of a Beyblade we're going to be talking about, which is Sagittario, and see what competitive value it has throughout its evolution and see what it was worth. So before we continue with this video, make sure to check out mallabase.com. It is an optional way to support the channel. I appreciate any support regardless. We have DB and BU stuff. Make sure to check it out, mallabase.com. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll go over the system overview. Starting us off basic, here is your metal wheel system. The faces are what displays the motif of the Beyblade and locks your Beyblade together. We have wheels that is a full metal wheel and what makes contact in battle. You have your tracks, which determine its gimmick or height, and bottoms that determine your Beyblade movement pattern and type. After that, with the hybrid wheel system, all you really need to know is now they separated the wheel and made it now a metal wheel, and now there is a clear wheel, a plastic that goes on top of the metal. With the 4D, you need to know that the D in 4D stands for different material, divided wheel, dynamic drive, and deep custom. All you really need to know here is that there is a core on Sagittario that is metal on the bottom, and a metal frame for flat Sagittario that goes on the top. As in Metal Fight fashion, most of the spirits chosen for these Beyblades are based off of constellations, and with Sagittario, Sagittarius was picked. It is a centaur being wielding a bow and arrow, the 9th astrological sign in the zodiac, and one of 88 constellations in space. In both the manga and the anime, Sagittario is owned by Kenta Yumiya. In the manga, he starts off with the metal wheel system, and his Sagittario is eventually destroyed by Busujima, with a later encounter by Ryo, disguised Jinga's father. The Bey changes into Flame Sagittario. Well, in the animation, Kenta already starts off with Flame Sagittario. A big departure comes in 4D and 0G for both the anime and the manga. In the 4D anime, Ryuga gives Kenta the power of Eldrago Star Fragment into Flame Sagittario that evolves into Flash Sagittario. So in the manga for 4D, when Jinga's basically creating a spirit bomb, Kenta's Bey just evolves, but it's only really when it hits 0G, when he's donned the identity of Masked X, that he actually uses Flash Sagittario for something. And he also trains Zero, which I thought that was kind of cool that they had him do something when he was a little bit older. Released on August 9th, 2008, we see the first ever Sagittario. So talk about the face of Sagittario. Its design is okay. It has the letter initials of Sagittario on it, and its eyes kind of make a bow and arrow. Cool, I guess, right? Then after you have your wheel, which is Sagittario. Now its design is also again like a bow and arrow. It protrudes on 4 sides and has an interesting enough shape. So for its presence, I would say that it had a niche presence. What really sucks about Sagittario is that it's the lightest out of the first 4, which already means the implications later on, if the weight's already that bad, then you're gonna have a lot less reason to justify using it. In terms of stamina use, I would just say it can do alright if you're just talking about the original 4. When I say alright, I mean kind of barely. It suffers from like a lot of recoil issues where it'll just get slapped around silly, potentially gets KO'd out of the stadium. So that's why if I ever mention this, the only use Sagittario could have really had was kind of some niche use for attack because of that weird recoil it manages to use to its advantage. But even then, even if you wanted to use it as this sort of niche attacker, you would probably just eventually use something like Pegasus, which does the exact same job of being an attacker, but actually better and more consistent. Even more humiliating is when you compare it to stuff like Virgo or Libra from the metal wheel system. Even if you want to say Libra got banned, well, Virgo is still right there, and either way, it is so hopelessly outclassed, even if you wanted to say some niche attacker. While true, the recoil can be used for attack, why not just pick more viable attack options during this time? The wheel does not have that many benefits. Next up, we have our height for our spin track, which is 145. Now, 145 was actually the tallest spin track before 230. Now to kind of give you like the rundown of like low, mid, and like tall height. So like low height would be like kind of like your 85 to 105, I guess. 120 to like, I don't know, like 160. And then after tall would be like 170 to 230. But you know, the tallest for its time, you know, what use did it have? Well, the thing is that Downforce 145 and Claw 145 have more use than it because weight and just I don't know, overall performance. Like the base 145 height, you wouldn't use it for anything. Not when you had the other options coming out. And right now in the context of the metal wheel system, you don't really have that many options. And, you know, ideally for something like even like defense, if we have Leona like 145 versus like Leona like 105, probably like the 105 is going to do a little bit better than the 145 because it's going to get less likely to get KO'd if it's on a lower height for defense. Obviously, there are a lot of stuff that got released later on for 145, or maybe that defensive use can be there, but just for the moment, during this era of early metal wheel system, no, doesn't make any sense to use. So then after for our tip, we have Sharp. So with Sharp, it's like a tiny little nub on the performance tip. I think of it as like a really tiny defense. Now the thing is like, if you had anything that's from like any of the defense stuff, like defense, you know what I mean, like et cetera, right? Anything from the D series, you probably wouldn't be using Sharp. There is a relevant combo later on with Flame Bolt that we'll be talking about, but otherwise, the hybrid wheel Sagittario with the metal system has virtually no real good parts during this era. There is nothing really that aged well that didn't already come on a different release if you wanted a specific part, and overall was just kind of Released on April 29th, 2010, Flame Sagittario debuts. Going over the weight of parts for Sagittario, you can just quickly pause here. So with the face bolt of Sagittario, for the design, it's more or less the exact same. It's just now it has like an outline to it. It looks nice. The clear wheel for Sagittario just simply had no actual use during metal fights because there was other stuff like Cancer, Aquario, Bull that had higher use for stamina. So it didn't have anything special for shape where it could be used for stamina or anything for attack that was all that special, just kind of meh, whatever. So then after with the Flame Fusion wheel, it did have some surprising use. The Flame wheel was, first of all, an evolved version of the pre-ab wheel Sagittario shape, retaining a similar concept of 4 protruding areas with the shape of a bow and an arrow. And I would say it was like first to a second tier stamina wheel combo to use. Even more, Flame got rivaled by things like Burn and Earth for like stamina use, but where it shined the best was actually being used as a destabilizer combination. In Season 1, it was used as a stabilizer combo on a low height and being stable. Didn't feature any great attack properties, just was high enough for stamina to work out. So if you did like Flame Bull on like 100S, you could even do flat if you want to. Against Rock Leone like Claw 145D. You'll notice that Flame does manage to destabilize the combination, making it start to wobble and fall down and outspin it. So for an example for a destabilizer, we have Flame Aquario versus Earth Bull with the same combination in a mirror match. So with Earth Bull against Flame Aquario and Downforce 145 ST against each other, you can see for an example there could be chances where Earth wins, or opportunities where, let's say, Flame could destabilize Earth and actually manage to beat it. There are cases where this can work during early MFB where the stamina is decent to use for Flame and it's not completely hopeless to use. Unfortunately, once you get to Season 2 of Metal Fight with releases of the Maximum series and the 230 height, you end up that Flame can't really be used that well because of the fact that there are options like Hell 230 or Basalt 230. And because the 230 spin track is very tall, right, and there are now specific ways to take down a 230 for what heights you will need and that type of stuff, a Flame just served no purpose because the other stuff just outclassed it for weight and use. Like if I did for you, for an example, Basalt Aquario 230 CS versus like Flame 230 CS. One of these things for defense is a lot easier than the other, and you will notice that Basalt or even something like Hell just gave way more purpose than Flame did. It's how it is, man. I'm sorry, it's how it is. If you're wondering, for the fan organization WBO, when they have a Metal Fight Limited format, which is under a specific type of ban list, something like Flame 230 CS can work pretty decent as a stamina combination and work well against, other stuff in that format. Now, for Claw 145, our spin track, it featured a gimmick where as you launch, as you launch it, basically the claws will pop out. Now, the idea was kind of like this weight and balance, whatever. It's supposed to like boost stamina. Does it actually do that? Now, the thing is, it was used for defense, but I have to preface it by saying defense in air quotes because Metal Fight had this issue until like Boost Disc was released in the Maximum series. The defense stuff needs to like actually be really pushed out for it to actually be true defense. It was kind of just more like defense, because you need it to be more outwards for it to actually count as defense for what the bait is actually making contact into. Alright, let's give a quick comparison with Rock Leone on Claw Wide Ball against Prewheel Pegasus on 105 RF. You can see examples here of where it's able to outlast its opponent and to be able to survive till the end, but it can still get pushed around. So here's for an example, and we actually go to like Earth Bull on Claw 145 Wide Ball, and we see the difference in performance where not only is it able to fairly tank against our fellow Pegasus release, but at least more consistently be able to tank and outspin the opponent. And this was pretty much a staple for a defensive combo in the meta. But before we move on, we have to talk about something pretty important with... So very quick TLDR, there was the original metal face, and then after the later ones in the 2010, whereas like the metal face variants, depending where you could place the metal on it. But basically a TLDR is that for defense types, you do need this because of the fact that you need the weight to make sure you don't get pushed out as easily. And for attack types, you need the weight so that way you can push out stuff easily. Now, was Sagittario a good release? Now, I actually have to say yes, Flame Sagittario was good. The clear wheel kind of did suck, but Flame was used as a decent stamina destabilizer and pretty good as for stamina in general for a certain period of time for the earlier parts of MFB, and C145 was pretty much good until BD145. So, you know, I mean, each of the stuff did have some pretty decent use and longevity for at least part of good early MFB. On February 18th, 2012, Flash Sagittario was released. Now, I have to say that for how this bait looks, I can't see it. I'm blind. Very quickly, if you want to see the weights for all the parts for Flash, here we go before we get right into it. Oh, I do have some good news. So the face bolt, you know, looks all right, I guess, kind of cool, I guess, for the concept. Sagittario 2, the clear wheel, actually is pretty good. Compared to some other high-tier stuff, like for an example, you know, Cancer, Aquaria, that type of stuff, Sagittario 2 is like pretty decent to use for stamina purpose because of its weight and shape. So if you don't want to use Aquario or Cancer, you know, Sagittario 2 does the job. It's a solid stamina clear wheel. Okay, now Flash is where this gets interesting because its stamina mode is kind of shaped like a bow, and I want to think the attack mode is basically shaped like an arrow, like you're shooting it, which I think is a really cool concept. Now obviously the attack mode's very based for its shape because it's oval. Now the stamina mode is kind of to represent flame. Now the thing is that it kind of is not good for stamina. Now Flash, if you want to use it in its stamina mode, is absolutely crap. It literally just can't do anything. It'll just get slapped away by its recoil and die. So there's literally no points to using it at all. Why use it? But the attack mode smacks. Now, for even optimal setups, if you want to use a clear wheel on Flash that fills it out well and can be useful for attack, there's stuff like Belzeb, there's other clear wheels like Orion, and these are just clear wheels that fill out Flash, you know, good enough to where you can use it for attack and they pair up pretty well for it. There's stuff like Ketos, or if you want me to say Cetus, there's even Scorpio, like all, and there's probably even other stuff, but these are just some examples. You know, you do it on a metal face heavy, on GB145, CH120, R2F, LRF, RF on a metal face heavy. Now keep in mind for how the hierarchy of 40 works, like Flash is pretty much at the top, right next to wheels like Diablo for their heavy and offensive power, being right at the top of the 4D bays. So for an example, with Flash on a heavy metal face on the Change 120 and like the RF tip, right? And you threw that up against something like on Diablo, like BD 145, right? You know, these are things that go toe to toe with each other. They compete with each other. These are the top of 4D. And if you try to see some other examples of Flash on the offensive, you'll see that Flash against stuff like Duo, for an example, is able to actually do decent enough to push it out. Now, it's pretty good. Once you get to 0G meta, it gets a little bit tough because the Synchroms kind of weight creep it out of there. It can't live in 0G because weight creep. Now, to give an example of the creep that does happen, this Flash combination is about 57.84 grams. Versus, let's say, a Synchrom, which is a very far difference in weight. So an example, like the flash combo, like the CH-120 on like the rubber flats, and against like Genbu, which is like this defensive synchrome, like 90 EWD. It's very defensive, it tanks a lot. It's just how Metal Fight is. Like, once there's like that weight difference, it becomes increasingly difficult for past stuff to get used. But the thing is, because dual bearing drive was used, because it has high stamina, it was able to be used for that reason against stuff like duo. Now, you could also get kind of funny if you want, because depending on how I'm talking right now, you're probably seeing footage. In the 0G meta, the combo to be using would be Flash with SA-165 on rubber flats. Now, the reason for this is that you get the support of a fat circle to help compensate for not only the shape, but also that big difference in weight. So unless you're just scared of your face bolts, you'll pretty much see that, yeah, it pretty much uses that to its effectiveness to make sure that it can actually like smack stuff and bong stuff out, because with the added weight and with the track to help out push out stuff, it gets, you know, slightly better and improved, and that's kind of cool to see that it didn't completely die, like it's usable. To also mention, in regards to the WBO, with their 40 format, Flash is pretty much at the top for like attackers that you would use. So if you're wondering for fan-run organizations, there is a presence there for Flash to be used, and anything else that I've mentioned is where also it would apply. Now, 230 still had a presence during the Metal Fight era. Now, the Spin Track 230 was interesting. Now, during the time of 4D, it still saw minimal use, but tracks like TH-170 worked better to its time due to the fact they could height change and generally being like the same as 230. And, you know, like during the end of 4D, it was like kind of like somewhat outclassed, but, you know, still kind of usable. Now, wide defense, because they like to slap like the same combination on bays, you know, if it's okay, right? I don't know why they didn't just give it like W2D or EWD. It was kind of just the lesser of both of them. Like, it's okay, but they should have picked better. Now, aside from that, I think overall, Sagittario was really good. I feel like Sagittario really started to grow and to evolve to something like really awesome. And it's kind of funny that for something that was really used for stamina, the final evolution ended up being mostly used for attack. That's something I really do love about Metal Fight. Just the uniqueness with how the designs evolve and how some things can be said for one thing but actually used for something else completely different. I love it. And that's pretty much it for this video. I don't know when's the next Beyhistory, but I do love doing this series. I don't really care what views these videos get. I obviously know covering Beyblade like this. Huge credit to Think, Dan, Keel, Sky Shield for their video advice, combo advice, history, context, and as well as a shout out to the WBO community. Great thank you for all the help to make the videos what they are, and appreciate all the support, everyone. And especially something old like Metal Fight, I'll probably not see that much, but I still appreciate any support regardless.